Welcome to today's Explainer. I am so incredibly excited you're here because we're about to look at something that is, quite frankly, totally mind-blowing. When we think of superpowers, we usually picture comic book heroes and capes, right? But today, we're going to unpack a literal, real-world biological superpower that is happening all around us, right this very second, hidden away inside the leaves of plants. It's a process so complex and so incredible, it actually sustains almost all life on Earth.
I want you to daydream for a second, okay? What if you could have a special ability that other organisms possess? Maybe you'd want to fly like a peregrine falcon or, I don't know, walk straight up walls without any gear like a Texas banded gecko. But what if I told you the ultimate superpower actually belongs to a simple plant? Think about it. If you had a plant superpower, you wouldn't need to go grocery shopping or cook dinner ever again. You'd have the ability to conjure your own food essentially out of thin air, using just sunlight, water, and breath. It absolutely sounds like magic, but it's pure biology.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our structural blueprint for today. First, we'll look at the ultimate plant superpower. Second, the photosynthesis equation. Third, capturing the light. Fourth, two major reactions. And finally, desert plant adaptations.
Starting with Section 1, the ultimate plant superpower and why we actually need plants.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty chemical mechanics of how plants pull off this incredible trick, we really need to establish exactly why understanding this specific botanical ability is absolutely crucial to our own human existence. Here is the wild reality of the situation. Humans, animals, and even single-celled amoebas completely missed out on this evolutionary ability. We just can't do it. But we benefit from it entirely. You see, any process that plants need to survive is directly important to us. Plants are the major producers in our world, which makes them absolutely indispensable to our food webs. So many of our medications, the foods we eat, and most crucially, the oxygen gas we breathe, come from this exact process. We need glucose, a simple sugar, just like plants do. The big difference is you get your glucose from, say, eating a sandwich, while plants just construct their own. Moving right along to Section 2, the photosynthesis equation and its chemical similarities.
Let's zoom in slightly and take a look at the core chemical magic spell that makes this plant superpower possible. Now, what's really interesting here is the elegant, almost poetic symmetry between plants and us. Notice how the overall balanced equation for photosynthesis, when compared to aerobic cellular respiration, which is what our bodies do, shows that the inputs or reactants of photosynthesis are largely the outputs or products of cellular respiration, and vice versa. The products of photosynthesis are the exact inputs for our cellular respiration. While it's not just a simple reverse switch, it is absolutely fascinating to see how beautifully interconnected our survival is with the plant world. To really grasp why this equation matters, we got to quickly talk about ATP. You can basically think of ATP as a biological energy currency that's used by plants, animals, and a whole host of other organisms. Both plants and animals need glucose to fund their cellular respiration to make this ATP energy currency. But again, the superpower here is that plants never have to go searching for their glucose. They are basically their own internal grocery store.
All right, Section 3, capturing the light and visible light wavelengths.
So how exactly do they run this grocery store? We're going to shift our focus to the very first requirement of this process, which is grabbing energy right out of the sun. To capture light, plants use specific light-capturing molecules called pigments. If you've ever played with a prism, you know that visible white light can actually be separated into this brilliant rainbow of colors, each with different wavelengths. Well, the primary pigment plants use is called chlorophyll. And here is a super fun fact. Chlorophyll is fantastic at absorbing red and blue light wavelengths, but it is terrible at absorbing green light. Instead, it just reflects that green light back. And that specific wavelength reflection is exactly why most of the plants you see around you appear wonderfully green to our human eyes. Which brings us to Section 4, two major reactions inside the chloroplast. This is where we zoom all the way down into the microscopic factory of the plant cell, the chloroplast, to see the actual machinery of the superpower in action. Inside the chloroplast, photosynthesis is broken down into two main events. We'll take this at a nice steady pace. First up are the light-dependent reactions. These take place in little compartments called thylakoids, which, when stacked together, are known as grana. In this very first step, light energy is captured by those pigments, and water, which is one of our key ingredients here, is literally split apart. This step also produces two key items: ATP, our energy currency, and another molecule called NADPH. Let's look a little closer at that water splitting step. When the chemical formula for water, H2O, is split by the plant, it produces electrons, protons, and oxygen. So the crucial point here, and this is mind-blowing, is that the oxygen gas sitting in your lungs right this very second, the oxygen we all desperately need to survive, is actually just a byproduct of this incredible microscopic water-splitting step inside a leaf. But, the plant isn't quite done yet. Before the second major reaction can begin, the plant needs to take a breath. It does this through something called stomata. Stomata are tiny pores, often found on the bottom of leaves. Plants have the incredible ability to actively open and close these pores to physically breathe in inorganic carbon dioxide gas straight from the air. Once that carbon dioxide enters the leaf, boom, we kick off the second phase, the light-independent reactions, also known as the Calvin cycle. This happens in the stroma, which is the fluid floating around outside those thylakoid compartments. The CO2 enters, and through a really complex series of pathways, a major enzyme fixes this inorganic gas into a much more usable organic form. Then, it uses the ATP and the high-energy electrons from the NADPH that were generated in that first step to ultimately convert this fixed carbon into glucose, sugar, literally out of thin air. Let's put these two halves together and look at the relationship between the processes. The light-dependent reactions capture the sun to make ATP and NADPH, releasing oxygen in the process. The Calvin cycle doesn't directly capture light, which, by the way, is why it's sometimes misleadingly called the dark reaction, even though it doesn't actually require darkness. But it absolutely relies on the ATP and NADPH from that first step, plus carbon dioxide, to finally build that glucose. They are a perfectly paired microscopic tag team. Finally, Section 5, Desert Plant Adaptations and Surviving Extreme Heat. Let's zoom all the way back out to the macro level. We know the standard process now, but how do plants modify this superpower to survive in the absolute most extreme, unforgiving environments on Earth? Well, consider the cactus. Cacti face a massive survival dilemma, which we'll call the cactus problem. Remember those stomata, the little pores plants use to breathe in carbon dioxide? Well, as a cactus opens its stomata during a blazing hot desert day to get the CO2 it needs for the Calvin cycle, the intense sun is going to cause its precious water to evaporate and escape at a rapid rate. It's a literal catch-22. Do you breathe and dry out, or hold your breath and starve? And this brilliantly illustrates how nature always finds a way. Certain desert plants, like the cactus, use a modified superpower called CAM photosynthesis. Instead of opening their pores during the dangerous heat of the day, they open their stomata safely at night when it's nice and cool. They capture the carbon dioxide in the dark and chemically store it. Then, when the sun comes up the next day, they keep their stomata tightly closed to hoard their water and simply use the stored CO2 to run their photosynthesis while the sun shines. They literally outsmart the desert by storing air overnight. How cool is that? We've journeyed from the huge macro scale of our food webs all the way down to the microscopic water-splitting factories inside a single leaf, and then back out to the sun-scorched desert. It's so easy to walk past a tree or a houseplant and just see it as a static, unmoving object. But inside, it is buzzing with the most important biological machinery on Earth. So I want to leave you with this final thought. What would our world look like without this silent, invisible superpower happening all around us? Without plants pulling carbon out of the air, creating the food that anchors our ecosystems, and exhaling the very oxygen that keeps us alive, we simply wouldn't be here. The next time you see a green leaf, I really hope you see it for what it truly is, a miraculous, life-giving superhero. Thanks for exploring this amazing topic with me today, and as always, keep staying curious.